I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:31 and recognize Steve Lemke, our member of the public here, waive rules of procedure, and ask if there are new additions to the agenda.
Yes.
So we have one.
We have one.
Which is to discuss the public notice on the electronic media, which needs to have, we need to make a decision on this before our next meeting. So it just came in this afternoon. So we will have a brief discussion of that. Under new business. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, the regular meeting of December 27th.
There was a change to the agenda in
There is?
that, yes, the discussion about the AFD contract was removed.
Oh, okay, not tabled, removed?
Tabled, removed, whatever. you want to
Okay, we're
label
not
it.
talking about it
We're
tonight.
not talking about it tonight.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Minutes, December 27th, 2017, last year. Did everybody get a chance to read them?
Yes.
Anybody have any comments?
I move that they be accepted.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Are you doing highway update for us?
Yeah, it's gonna be very simple. They've been plowing, salting, and sanding.
It's true,
And
and staying warm.
Times 10.
Yeah, and doing repairs to equipment. I saw Dan this morning, and that's all he had to say. So he was not showing up tonight just
No, that's fine.
because they were not sure how much snow we're gonna get overnight.
Gabrielle?
Good. So
They've done a great job so
They
far.
were amazing, yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you so much.
So the first item under new business was donating public funds to private organizations. I know that Peter has been in touch with VLCT to try to answer a couple questions
sorry.
a question that Gabby raised about whether a public organization can donate, whether you can use public funds to donate
donations.
to donate to private organizations.
that is not a social service agency.
That is not a social service agency. And so Peter is working with VLCT and hopes to have an answer for us in the future.
So pending that,
We're
we're not doing
yeah.
anything.
You
Okay.
posed the question already, though.
Yes.
And we're waiting for an answer, is that?
Well, I've been playing phone tag
Oh.
with one of the attorneys up there.
And actually, it's not that we're not doing anything. It wouldn't be us. It would be in the budget, that the town
No,
would
I
have to.
have no
you know, so-
problem
yeah.
with that.
And
And
we
I
just need
think
to
that,
clarify if we can put it into the budget, I
Right.
believe.
and I think that, this issue will be relevant to other select boards, so it will be good to find out.
We may be trailblazing.
Always. Peter, GPI construction management contract.
Yes. So we received the draft contract from GPI using the standard AIA contract. So you were likely to have seen much of the similar language to the contract that we received from Greenburg Associates. So if there may have been some of that in there. They also had previously sent just a general copy that was not filled out, but this one is filled out with all the relevant information. In my reading of it, I did not see anything outstanding. Chip Greenburg gave his stamp of approval to it, and felt that it coincided with what their proposal stated, and basically need you all to either approve it or send it back with edits if you had any concerns or questions.
Because I had a couple questions, but I don't know if we want to do this in executive session because it's a contract negotiation or not. Because I would just pose that issue.
So are the,
If the concerns put the town at disadvantage, then we should.
yeah.
We should.
Otherwise, it's up to you to decide.
So yeah,
I mean,
you should have to
it's-
advise if these are concerns that might put the town at disadvantage.
I mean, I think any negotiation would. So
I think it makes sense. I think Gabby's point is well taken.
Okay, so if we can move that, we'll move that to
end.
executive session.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Gabby. the next new item on the agenda is that this afternoon, I believe,
Yes.
there was a communication from VLCT asking select boards to write to the legislatures in support of choice of public notice. There is a bill that's been introduced that where we can use, the bill would propose to allow the state and its political subdivisions to publish public notices on electric news media designated as newspapers of record by the Secretary of State. It's a pretty short article. I don't know if you had a chance to pretty short and pretty straightforward bill. But this letter is just to express our support for having that as an option, not,
And is that, would this, signing this be from the select board of Guilford or each one of us individually?
it would be from the select board.
Is there any reason why we would not want to support this?
This is the first I've heard of it.
Right.
My opinion is no. I think their point about, that the VLCT's point about encouraging younger Vermonters who overwhelmingly get their information from web-based news media is a really important point. And I know lots and lots of people who don't get either newspaper.
Right.
And so I think it is a great idea to.
And this is in
also
addition
have-
to newspapers.
It is an option, yeah.
Yeah, it's just
It's
an
an
option.
option.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are still items that affect property that must be published electronically.
Gotcha.
And so you couldn't do it exclusively. It must be published in print, so you couldn't exclusively use electronic media.
Mhm.
No, I think it certainly makes sense in conjunction with the print that we already do, so,
Okay?
from my perspective.
And VLCT has been advocating for this for quite a number of years now. And the Senate has finally decided to do something about it.
Crazy we don't have it, to be honest with you, but very good.
So does this require a motion?
Yes, authorizing.
Can I just have a moment to actually read this, because I haven't seen this before, sorry.
No, we all just got it.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, I know.
Yep, it was just sent out this afternoon.
I didn't read it.
And I thought it was
Yeah.
important, and then Sheila noted the timeliness of it.
why are they getting this out so tardy?
They're probably picking the low fruit for the legislators right now, like get this one done, and dealing with Steve Lemke.
Sheila, is the process to use it complicated, and do we have somebody who can do that? Is that you, Peter, or
It would be me, yes.
is there any complication to?
They've defined news media.
It's
Website.
It's
I mean,
website,
it's a website-based
an
informational
internet website
post,
dedicated to Vermont news.
which, I mean, to me would go up on our website as an
Yeah.
additional place that we place information
Which
to communicate
you
with
do
our
already,
townspeople.
so.
Right, well,
Yeah,
I didn't know it.
I mean, we actually kind of do this already. If we are posting something, we put the town report up on the website. Sorry, Gabby.
No, that's okay, you can talk. I just need to focus.
No, it's just that we do that as a courtesy currently, but that does not count in the law. The way that the state statute is currently written, that does not count as a way of notifying residents of
An official notification.
official notification, exactly.
And I guess my only concern for people would be that we were gonna take away the others, and that's not the intent at all.
No,
We're gonna
I don't think
continue
so.
with that.
No.
This is another avenue for which we can claim.
And I think that VLCT's advocacy for it
Right.
really goes that they're trying to increase the audience that is being reached.
Makes sense.
But the electronic media is already in there under C on page 2. It's just, this is an amendment to that defining what electronic media means. That's the way that I'm reading this.
Yes.
Is that the way you see it, Gabby?
No, the C is the insertion to
Oh, the
the
C
current
is the
statute.
insertion.
Yes.
Okay.
The C and everything underlined is an insertion to the current statute.
Mm-hmm.
So it just seems to me to just be saying that we can publish the notice on an electronic news media as defined below,
Mhm.
which basically means it needs to be in English, accessible to not less than the majority of the residents in each county, which is interesting. It needs to be searchable, and that it needs to be kept in a physical form available for public inspection as well. So, I mean, honestly, with the, like, if we're gonna put it in the Brattleboro Reformer, they do it online anyway. So I think this is just gives us another option.
Yeah.
So why not?
I'm all for it. Shall I move?
You should, you could.
Please.
I move that we support the legislation, the bill rather. What else do I need to say?
To give municipal boards in Vermont the option of posting legal and other public notices on web-based news media.
Excellent.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Veranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'll sign this later, I can't. So old business is river corridor bylaw, and this is not actually to make a decision on the bylaw or to talk about it in any way other than to say that what I've let people know before is that we've done all this public outreach, and I think for the record I'll go through and say what we've done. We've had extensive and comprehensive efforts to reach out to and engage as many residents as possible in this river corridor bylaw review and adoption process. There's been a Gazette article explaining the bylaw, its purpose, and the impact. Steve, or the town office, or somebody mailed 461 postcards to people who own property in Guilford that is either already in the special flood area, hazard area, and or would be located in the river corridor. We had Steve and the select board and others held a public information session, which was attended by approximately 70 residents, at which the bylaw was presented and concerns and questions were addressed. Steve and people, and Peter and particularly Steve, have had many individual and group conversations with people who have questions or concerns about this bylaw in the period since.
Just so there's a definition to many, 20.
20, wow. So in addition to the 70 that were at the meeting?
Right, since the public meeting, I've talked to 20 individuals who had questions of varying degrees. Like,
So you're talking about approximately 40% of the people who got the postcard.
Right.
That's
but most
impressive.
of it was heavy right after the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
because and then like everything has a peak, and then it keeps dwindling down. The last one I had was just like early to mid December. So there's and you can see by the number of people here tonight. We also had the side meetings, and I think that helped too, because the chairs aren't full.
There's 3 people were referred to you last week and then somebody else today. So interesting that they hadn't contacted you yet.
So we are now, Steve and I worked on this, a proposed schedule to get to closure on this, which is that tonight we will decide if we are ready to vote on the adoption, on the issue of adopting the bylaw, not on adopting, at our first meeting in February, which is February 12th. And this will give us another 4 weeks for people to ask questions and for any final contemplation on the matter that we might have. This would also give 4 weeks for us to discuss with the publications in town some kind of article about this. At the last paragraph of which would advise readers that the select board will act on the matter on this date if we decide to do so tonight, and that in the interim Steve is still available to address concerns, answer questions, and provide information. So that would get us to the end, to either adopting, to the issue of whether, to the vote of adopting it or not on February 12th. And it would be effective immediately on February 12th, right? Would be effective.
Two things. First of all, in addition to the public notices and thing, the town website has had a complete copy of the bylaw,
Oh, that's right.
frequently asked questions, and the Gazette article, which is really good, because I think some of the call I got saying, I just came off the website and I was on the A&R Atlas page, and do I have this right? So there's a whole process for people to learn how to do it. They feel good as a result of that. The second thing, once the bylaw is, if you decide to adopt it, it cannot go into effect any sooner than 60 days from the time that you adopt it. It can go in, you can specify a date beyond that if you want to, but it can't go into effect any sooner than 60 days.
Is that for public comment period after, or
It's to
Public
give,
notice?
it's to give a period of, sort of reflection on the part of everybody, for that period of time to look at. It's all done, it's all ready to go and everything. There's nothing that has to be filed or anything at that point, but there is a 60-day minimum time frame.
Gabby?
Are there any citizen concerns that you've been hearing that would lead us to maybe want to revisit anything within the draft bylaws?
Most of the calls that I've taken are from people who have a question. First of all, many of the people had no idea they were already in the special flood hazard area. So, I feel good about one thing is that we accomplished a goal that I think was primary among us, is to get the word out about the special flood hazard area and the existing bylaw, as well as the amplify what we were talking about as far as the new bylaw is concerned. So that was very helpful to people who didn't know that in the first place. Most people are only marginally impacted by the bylaw itself, because when you say, okay, let's look at this online, and you see, here's the map of the special flood hazard area, and here's the special flood, and here's the bylaw, and the river corridor, and most of those are almost mirror images of themselves. There are 3 or 4 properties that had, more, dramatic impact, and I've asked John Broker Campbell, who was from Agency of Natural Resources. He's going to come down someday this month, and we're going to drive around and physically visit those 3 or 4 sites to say, as case studies, to say, is there something on the map that we're not seeing here? Can we mitigate this somehow? Not to fight for people to do something they shouldn't do, but just before we say to somebody, 65% of your land is now impacted by this corridor, is that true? Mm-hmm. We want to make certain that in those people who are impacted, but not one person has unloaded on the craziness of this or anything else. And partly that's because we've shared as much information as we can with them.
Due diligence.
Well, and the way you have presented the information
it's
in
a
a very open,
It's a whole package of information.
concise form. Well, it makes a big difference when you communicate up front what everything is in a clear manner.
And there's a big discussion about what we're doing now versus 2007, which was a different situation. That was clearly just a revision, and the select board at that time simply adopted the new FEMA maps that were in place and updated since 1989. This is new, but I think doing the public meeting and things like that really did make a difference, and being available for people to discuss it.
Mm-hmm. I had a question which wasn't so much for you as something, I don't know whether anybody has addressed this. For the few people who have significant land that's now in the flood hazard area, I wonder whether the listers would be altering the assessment, of their property value, because this was a concern that I heard from people that being listed in having a significant piece of their land in a flood hazard area would lower their property value, and therefore would that be reflected in their taxes. And so I don't know if this is the time to think about it, but it's a concern that I had. That people brought up to me and that I share.
I think it's a valid concern, and I think it is an issue, a property by property issue, not a general across the board matter, because every property, if I'm understanding it correctly, it would be different, right, Steve?
Well, the impact on property, if somebody has 80 acres and 8 feet of their property is in the river corridor, that's different than somebody who has an acre and a half and 90% of their property is in,
Yeah.
But I think the listers would pick up on that
No, I think that
as
you
a
have
property value.
You have 2 ways
discussion.
of grieving. One is to the listers, and the other way is to the permitting process. If something, if a property owner needs to do something, and they can appeal for a waiver.
Yeah, they can approve for a waiver or a variance.
Yeah, a
And-
variance, sorry.
And that's, the new Flood Hazard Review Board would do that. A&R would ring in on that as well, but there may be certain circumstances that you would want to hear as this board to say, that's particularly difficult, for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Does a property owner have a legal obligation to declare whether they're in the river corridor or not?
You
Or
mean
the
if
flood
they were
zone?
going to be selling their...
Yes. Does it have to be?
Well, wouldn't that, anybody who was researching the place that they were thinking of buying, isn't it a matter of public record?
Well, listen, that's what I'm asking.
It is, and if you were to do if you had an attorney do a title search and things like that, that would come up.
But nobody is obligated to say, it's the buyer beware in that situation, as it is with liens on the property or anything else. There's nothing more dramatic about this than the existing bylaw that's already there.
Right.
But there's no obligation. If somebody walks up and gives you money, cash in hand for a piece of property, you're not obligated to say, oh, the sun shines here and this is the...
I think that's well out of our realm.
So the question on the table, and I don't think this requires a motion, I think it just requires an agreement. If we are in agreement that we will bring this to the agenda on the 12th.
And I guess my only question, and Steve, I'll direct this more toward you, but also the other select board members, should we have another public meeting? You know, what's to be gained, what's not to be gained? You know, we did have an informational session, we had one, and I feel that the information's been shared online in every format possible, so the word can get out there, but, you know, you have 70 people show up for a meeting in this town, other than town meeting, that's a lot of people. You know, what is your personal opinion on having a second meeting, other than obviously there's a cost involved in time from people to do it?
I don't think a full-blown public meeting again is the right way to go, because I don't think, you know, to do everything that requires to get a full public meeting together to talk to 15 people who have the access to come back to me individually. What I've seen it boil down to is that it's really an individual situation for people. They can come to a public meeting and hear about the bylaw and they can hear all the reasons to do it, but what they really want to do is say, what about my property, which is logical, you know?
Yep.
So I think me being available and getting the word out that we're there, having it on the website, that would be my personal opinion. I can understand exactly what, you know, if somebody disagrees with that or something on one reason or another, but. You know,
I agree with you, Steve.
That's fine.
And is it published widely that people can come and see you, and your contact information is on the website, or is there some way that we can make sure?
It's all on the town website, and I'm listed along with you guys with a separate number as floodplain administrator.
Right.
And we've been handing out his number left and right.
And we will, if we succeed in getting an article into the Reformer in the Commons, that will be the final point. If you have questions, please contact Steve.
Great.
So.
I'm sorry to have interrupted, and this is why I came. I was tired. London Lipke, down on Broadbrook. I'm sorry I missed the beginning.
So let me just let you know, we're talking about the schedule for coming to a vote on we're not making a decision tonight on the River Corridor bylaw. We're talking about the schedule, which would involve some more public communication in the form of a couple of articles, more opportunities for individuals to speak with Steve Lemke about their own concerns, and then voting in a month. So people have another month to seek information and to discuss any issues or concerns that they have or questions with Steve. So
I guess I have this statement. I went to the meeting purely, you know, for information. I think we were all surprised how concerned or upset the Martins were. So it does affect individuals and their property. I don't necessarily consider my property equity. Of course it is, but that's just not my approach. I'm a prominent spot in Guilford's waterways, utilized by, these days, too many people. My main concern is always going to be conservation. I'm not sure if we realize that what I purchased were mill rights. So if those were to be taken away from me, in that case I might need some reimbursement, which I don't even know how we would quite determine that, because as it stands, I'm under state jurisdiction. If I was to be denied potential, the state's obligated to pay me 80% of potential loss, which I would never go after. You know, 18 years in Putney, I never went after the wool incentive. it would have behooved me to do so.
Well, we
But
should
I'm
probably,
just not on the tape.
you and I should probably either talk now or soon, so that I can figure out where you are. If you're if you're talking about the special flood hazard area that already exists under the current bylaw that's been in place since 1989 and revised in 2007, or if you're really impacted by this new bylaw that's being proposed. So that's where we should start, is looking at your property and say, is there a problem, whatever that problem might be, you know, acreage or mill rights or anything else. If there's no problem, that takes care of that, at least for your side of things, you know. So if you're willing to do that, I could talk to you now, or I could get your address, or I could call you back, or you know, certainly I'm not trying to cut you off, but if it's a one-on-one conversation, we might be better off talking. Then you don't have to have all your personal information on camera either about things that are...
And I think that's a
I'm up
good
for that.
option, yeah.
I'm up for that.
Yeah, we can go right now if you want
You
to.
can go
Thank
on
you.
with your meeting and we'll go in the other room.
So the only thing I want to ask you is, would you please sign in, because you are now in a public meeting. Thank you so much for
And
coming.
you are Sheila Morris?
I am.
How do you do?
Thank you.
Here, London.
Oh, gosh.
I'm Richard
Oh, my
Bozansky.
arm's not, my hand's not gonna work.
And
So,
then you
plug
will,
kits are pretty straightforward. It was the packaging I couldn't get through.
Oh.
I'm sorry?
no, I was just going to say thank you for coming, and thanks you, Steve, for taking the time now to discuss this with me.
Yeah, it's good.
The next thing on the agenda is the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, and we agreed at the beginning of our select board year last March that we would examine our membership in the waste district.
Not me, but who I would
And,
Excuse me.
and I think we've done due diligence.
Agreed.
And we've discussed it at meetings, we gave people opportunities to come, we've had a workshop on it, we've done some evaluations of things, we've had long conversations with Cheryl and other trash haulers, and we've given people in the community an opportunity to give us feedback. And I think we need to bring this to closure. And I would make two other comments. One is that the information sheet that we had, Bob Spencer said he wanted to edit, but he did not get those edits back to me. I don't think they're going to be material. And the second comment is, it seems to me that if we were, I mean, I think we are all in agreement that if we were to exit and create our own plan, it would cost way more than the new fee for next year, which will be under $18,500, I think, $18,457.
That's correct. And
Which
like
is-
12 cents, something like that.
Well, thank you. Which is $6,000 less than this year's fee, and it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make economic sense for Guilford to try to go
Right.
out and redo this. But I think we should actually, because this has been an issue on the table for almost a year, take a vote that we agree, or to stay in the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, or that we would still pursue this issue further, whatever people are inclined to do.
Can you just give a quick summary of what the cost and the timeline would be to pull out of the district?
Yes, if you'll hold on a moment.
Because while it might not be, it might cost more than in our annual fee this year with the expected increases over 3 years,
Right.
it might pay off. So
The
I just
big
want to
thing-
have the numbers in my head.
And Sheila
It's in
will
the
pull,
memo that we have.
she'll pull up the memo, but the big thing really comes down to the hazard waste
Yeah.
days that we have to provide according to the state. And at 10,000 a
That
clip,
was
that's
10,000,
$40,000.
yeah.
If we
A
don't
year.
have 4 other towns that we can partner with set up. That to me is really the big piece.
And so how are other towns doing that, just pulled out, going about addressing that concern? Do we have any
The
idea?
cost of it? Or
Or
how
even the
they're gonna
hazardous
deal with
waste days, if that's the rate limiting, sort of saying, okay, that's just does us in. The other towns have recently pulled out. How are they dealing with that cost or dealing with meeting that requirement?
Well, they don't have a choice in meeting it. For example, Whitingham recently pulled out. They are obligated by the state to meet that specific portion of the SWIP. How they are financially doing so, I do not know yet.
Did Dover pull out?
No, they voted not to.
Yeah.
They were,
And it's partially because of the
Okay,
cost of
hazardous
the
waste.
hazardous
right.
waste days, correct.
Okay,
Share the,
so,
all of it, because that was the one that stood
So
out to me. that
it's
was crazy.
$30,000 a year minimum for hazardous waste.
30,000.
$30,000.
Well, that's as it
Three.
is right.
That's
It's
right now,
three
3-0, and you have to
events,
do 3 times a year.
But that's
And
changing to
that's
4.
changing to 4
That's changing,
in
it's 3
2019.
to, yeah, okay.
2019.
We also would have to spend money that we don't know how much that would cost on education of residents. Do you want me to print this out for you again, Gabby?
Yeah, you know, because if it's not in the, it's just sometimes difficult for me to find things with all our folder. So if it's not in the packet that we get for this meeting's prep, sometimes I just
Okay,
can't grab it.
So the current cost we had shown as $25,000 in membership fee, but now it's going to be $18,457. And then there's a cost to residents, but that's a different issue. The exit cost would be $10,000, a one-time exit fee, $3,000 for the solid waste implementation planning fee.
How much was that again?
3,000, so that's up to 13. So that's, and then there is a cost of a fee also to
The assessment fee.
the assessment fee, and
Which
that was
for Guilford was-
indeterminate. I can't remember how much.
Yeah, they had determined that to be approximately just over $12,000 was what our
So
fee to leave the district.
it would cost us $25,000 to exit in 1 year before we started implementing our own plan, which would be the cost of creating a plan, the cost of administering a plan, the cost of setting up and managing facilities, the cost of hazardous waste, which is the $30,000 fee
Plus
that we
the
know of,
education.
the cost of education, and it just doesn't seem to make sense
And then on top
over
of
the
that-
short or the long run.
Then all residents in the town would be responsible for dealing with trash through private trash haulers. They would no longer have access to Old Ferry Road.
Getting a
Which
sticker or
Getting
paying
a sticker.
$35
That's
a year,
correct.
whatever it is for a sticker.
Yeah, that's correct. They would
Right.
not be able to do that any longer.
And at the public meeting that we had following the floodplain bylaw meeting, there was a lot of concern from people who were still going to the dump about what they would do if we left.
But the total consensus of, at least that I walked away from that meeting with the people that stayed to have this conversation with us, was that this was a no-brainer based on numbers like this. From their perspective, they all, and what they advocated for was the ability to have their sticker.
Yeah.
They were
Because
still
the sticker-
concerned about, the increasing costs over time, obviously, and recyclables down the road, how, and those were the two issues that I kind of took away from that meeting.
And Bob Spencer, when he came to that meeting, seemed to have new numbers, lower numbers than the ones that we had anticipated.
Right, it was
but
gonna
we
cost us
still-
And they were slightly amended, but
Yes.
But we still haven't gotten real clarity.
Clarity
No, we
there,
have.
and the hope
We
that,
have gotten the clarity on the
Oh.
fee for the year,
Yes.
which is
Oh,
the
yes.
$18,000. I don't know, and their
But-
budget, they just voted on last Thursday night, and I haven't seen the
Haven't seen
figures
it.
come out yet.
but the other thing that weighed into his forecast or direction is that costs should be going down, because all they're doing, they no longer, I asked the question, I was concerned about equipment, and the need for new trucks. We're not hauling anything, we're shipping it all out, so it's not on them to maintain that. So he said our costs are going like this,
Good.
and not even, so that we should feel a reduction. Am I correct? And do
That's
you
what-
recall?
yeah.
I mean, that's the way
I
he
think-
reacted
that's
to
how he
the
presented it,
questions.
yeah.
I think that the projections certainly call for that, indicate that, but we've seen that those projections don't hold up over time, and that was
I
actually
agree
one
with
of,
you.
I think, our valid concerns, that the financiers are unknown. You can make a projection, but then if you start looking at year-to-date performance or actual performance against projections, it hasn't been as rosy as it was
Exactly.
projected. This is not a decision from here to eternity. This is a decision that can be revisited on an annual basis. And my suggestion is that this year, it certainly doesn't make financial sense for us to withdraw.
Oh, no, I think Gordon's absolutely correct that if we can't find a more cost-effective measure to deal with hazardous waste, it's
No.
I mean, the other thing is that it exponentially puts the burden onto residents, because there's the increase in tax cost to residents because of the increase in cost to the town for hosting the
Right.
hazardous waste days as well as the education aspect. But then in addition to having higher expenses for that, residents will also have higher expenses because then their only option is to either dump it on the side of the road or to hire a private hauler. Is what, if the town decided to leave. So
I
I
mean,
think there's double incentive.
it's all, I mean, to me, it's either the annual fee is being put onto the taxpayer or a different set of fees, and I think it's just a matter of figuring out which one is going to be most,
Right, and I agree.
is
with you.
least burdensome on the taxpayer.
Right,
And I
exactly.
think right now it's absolutely the annual,
Yeah.
sticking as a discount.
Clear.
But just to get back to your question, should the town decide to leave, first it has to go to, before residents at town meeting, has to be Australian ballot. And then if the residents decide that they want to leave, then we have to notify the district by October 1st at the latest. And then after that notification, then you still have that full remaining nearly 10 months of the fiscal year before you're actually out. So that's the general timeline. And the other portion of the timeline is you have to have a solid waste implementation plan that has been written and approved prior to notifying the district that you're leaving.
So do we need a motion?
I think so. I think we need to.
And one other thing was that, we had concerns about accountability, and I feel as if in the back and forth about our decision-making, that concern must have been heard. Just about, when we first started talking about this, there was just some concern about transparency, predictability, things like that. And I think that the solid waste district has been aware of that and tried to respond to it.
Yes, I agree with you.
So I move that the town of Guilford remain with the solid waste management district in 2018,
Fiscal year 2019.
2019.
I think just continue its membership without
Fine.
a year, because we can reconsider if we need to at a later date.
Okay, I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Greenburg Associates, Peter.
Yep, just one moment, please.
Yep. And I think this item on the agenda is to review the 3 draft
Schemes.
That
Yes,
they,
so
for renovations of the town office.
these have all been sent to you, but I have them in paper form, so
Good.
here is the very first one that was sent to us. That's one for you and one for her.
Oh, okay.
And that's the one that had the office.
That's correct. This is one
business,
that
yeah.
you all resoundingly said you disliked. So there's that one. Here's the second one. Oh, I'm actually missing one, but it's irrelevant because
So
you
this
also said that you
is the
did not.
first
The
one.
original.
That is the original one that he made. There's one for each of you.
This
This
is the
is-
original.
This is the second one?
Yes,
It
this
says
is
down here, scheme 1, scheme,
Oh, yeah.
the date's
Oh,
November
I
11th.
love labeling.
yeah,
Excellent.
the dates are a little bit off because he forgot to change them in a couple of instances. So this is the second one, and there was one other one after the one that I just gave you. Did I give you one? Sorry.
November 30th.
That I inadvertently forgot to print out. And that was the one in which the stairs were moved to the other end of the building. But that was resoundingly disproved by all of you as well as by my colleagues.
So it's really the only difference, the wall's gone, Peter? That's
In that one there, in the two that you have here. This is
November
the-
11th and November 30th.
So here is the final
Oh, okay. I'm
draft
sorry.
that you guys have had over the weekend, and this is the one that he's most interested in I think this has the,
I'll put one here and put the camera
yep,
on.
I have
Oh,
extras.
that would be great.
Do you want me to put it on A1?
They're all,
No, it's
they're all
January
A1.
3rd.
It's this, yeah, the January
But
3rd.
you want me to look at this one?
Oh, I see,
Yes,
so it's
please.
moving your,
The
So-
office to the left of the
So-
entrance.
Yes, so what it is it's slightly, it's increasing the size of the addition on the north end of the building by only 3 feet, actually. In moving an office for my position down there, creating an ADA accessible restroom, moving the mechanical, and then shifting the doors around slightly as had been on the previous examples.
so the small meeting room looks like it's a little smaller
Slightly,
than it was originally
and
proposed.
that is
And
correct.
the Lister office is a little smaller than. it
Nope,
would
the
be.
Lister office is actually slightly bigger.
It is?
Yes, because
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry.
in
Sorry, I
the
looked at the wrong one.
shifting of moving the office for
Good.
the town administrator at that end, it removed the additional storage space that had been created for the listers. And so he felt it would be important for them to not lose that space
Good.
and created that space within their office. So that people coming in, instead of using the small meeting room that had questions for the listers, could just work with them in their office, and then the smaller meeting room could be used as a meeting room as well as for research space for attorneys and real estate agents and others who are doing deed research and working with the town clerk. And so that would then enable this room to be a large conference room. And this space could be expanded to have more space for the select board and whomever else would need to sit at the table, as well as space for members of the public.
So one of the things I like about this is that you are more accessible and visible to the public than sitting behind here,
Yes.
but you also have the opportunity to have a quiet workspace.
We have a door.
Yeah,
Yes.
and a wall. So that seems to make a lot of sense. This large meeting room, I think, we'll find is maybe too big, but, maybe not.
Well, I mean,
we don't need
there've
it.
been moments when
Yeah.
it's been too small, so.
Yes. So we can certainly host,
I mean, I'm concerned, the coffee bar looks to be like right in the public reception area.
It is, there's gonna be a half wall in front of it, kind of hiding it from the reception area. There's gonna be, this specific scheme doesn't have any furniture, but the idea is to have a few chairs sitting next to it for the public to sit down if they have to wait, or et cetera, for a meeting or whatever they're doing. There had been a lot of thought put into the little space to have a small sink and space for the refrigerator and et cetera for those.
it's not the bathroom sink.
That's not the bathroom sink.
That's
And
good.
that really came out to be the best location for it, particularly because that's where the plumbing is.
So it,
And I guess my other thing is that this can't, so my only concern is, one option I'd like to have is to be able to phase things in. Because let's say this comes out, we get an estimate that's $400,000, which wouldn't be completely out of question. I would like to have an option of phasing the construction in, so doing things incrementally over the course of time. This doesn't allow that option because the only way to get it ADA compliant fully would be to add the addition on. I'm wondering if there's anything.
As it stands right now, there's not really a way to get an ADA compliant restroom the way we have it right now. And part of what you're asking about is what's going to happen when we have our first meeting with Joe Fortier from GPI.
what is the meeting tomorrow morning? To talk about this?
Yes, this is for the architect wants to spend some time with you guys talking about the design, talking about a few other aspects that you are interested in for having done on the structure, as well as to kind of give some updates to everyone as to where things are at.
And that's at 7:30 tomorrow.
Yes, that's correct.
I don't think you warned that meeting, did you?
It had been previously warned, when they were all set up. Yep, I had warned
Okay.
them. That was,
And we have to be,
while
like, be
back.
aware of that we have to
Yep.
warn every meeting that we have
Yep.
with these, with the,
so yes, that had been,
okay, thank you for thinking
as
of that.
had all of the budget meetings were also
Okay,
warned
yeah,
as
I saw
well.
those. Sorry, go ahead.
So as well as to talk about the next steps with everyone.
So
Are
Gabby,
you
one
gonna
of
be
the
here tomorrow? No.
One of the things that I really appreciate that question, because maybe one of the things that could be staged later is the exterior work, or some of the envelope or something like that, if we have to do this kind of thing right away, you know.
I mean, I guess my first question would be, what do we need to make it, what would the, Assistant State Fire Marshal want to make it ADA compliant? So, I mean, what I would like to see is the ability to phase things in, so we don't need to ask for a bond or to go to taxpayers or to pull out too much of our reserve funds. I mean, that's my thought process. So if there is a way to phase things in, and add on later, if that's a possibility, I'd like to investigate that possibility.
Well, and that,
So that's all I'm saying. Like, if there's a way to expand the current bathroom and add ramps, that seems like it's a serious decrease in scope and a decrease in funding required. Is there a way to do that and then just add on later for something else, so we wouldn't lose that money either? That's just my question. It's a general proposition.
And I think that question we would need to look at in terms of the overall budget and the sources of funding once we have information from GPI, and just decide. I mean, we've talked from the beginning about the possibility of phasing in over time to be able to handle this responsibly and to not incur debt for the town, and to
Right.
not reduce our reserve fund too much, and that's why we've been funding the capital budget, and so.
Right. I mean, this doesn't allow for that, right? I mean,
It may not.
Well, I guess it's a
That's-
conversation.
I think it's just a
before-
conversation to explore.
I think I've got a note of it, and I think tomorrow
that's-
I
It can
will
be
be at
brought
this
up
meeting,
tomorrow.
and we will discuss
But
it
that's
to
also-
see if there are options.
that's the part of the point of the meeting to occur with GPI that's I'm attempting to schedule next week. That's part
So
of
tomorrow morning, we're meeting with
only the
Chip.
architect, with Chip and Brandon.
Okay.
One of
But
his
just the
employees.
architects.
But just the architects. And then next week, we'll be meeting with the architects and with GPI to go over the cost estimates, as well as to discuss how this can be phased. Because they're very aware that from the very beginning, that has been a concern for all of you.
Okay.
And so that's what that initial meeting will be about.
Okay.
So my understanding is that the issue on the table tonight is which plan do we,
That's
Like-
correct.
Do we like A,
And
B, or
then-
C?
yeah, 1, 2, or 3. And then the
okay.
January 3rd, November 30th, and November 11th, and that it's not a go-ahead until we understand that it's going to meet our other requirements. It's just that this is the plan we want to start working on.
And it's important.
not.
And it's important because in order for GPI to provide the first set of estimates for cost,
Well, you
they
can
need
have
to
an
know
idea
which
of
of
what we're doing.
Yeah.
which plan
Yeah.
it is that you're most interested in pursuing.
What did your colleagues say?
Overall, the one that has the highest support is the one that's dated January 3rd, 2018.
Okay.
And what were their comments about the plan? Did they have any concerns or issues?
Overall, no. They were all very supportive of having my office space be moved out there with all of them. The only, I guess you could say, minor concern was from the listers and losing the storage space that had been planned in copy that was dated November 11th.
And they could use
Do you
this
want to
one.
look at
That's what I'm
the
thinking.
November
Some
11th
ways.
one?
There's
Yeah.
a lot more storage space here now.
So,
The other, it just, when we
So
finish
finish,
with.
yeah.
So, everyone's very pleased with the idea of shifting the access in the use of the small meeting room. That's very well supported by all of them. They also like the idea of having this be the primary meeting room and not having me have my office space back here. They also in general, like the idea of having the restroom and the mechanical space a little bit more private. As at the moment, our mechanical room is right out in the open, and due to some ventilation issues, we often have the door open. So that's the first thing that people see when they come in for town business. The other thing is, it's a minor point, but if this were to be the plan that's gone with, is the wall space behind where the little sink area and space is there is actually proposed to be a large bulletin board, so people can actually walk in the office and see things, because very few people make use of the bulletin board where it's located currently.
The other thing I like about this is we wouldn't have to incur the expense of moving the stairwell.
Absolutely.
That would be pretty major.
In terms of phasing, I guess one question for the architect would be, would it be possible to go forward with this expansion and maybe do some of the other renovation later?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a feasible thing, or is this just such an expensive chunk of it that it would, there's no... Well, it's just based on starting with nothing and then having this, it's clearly going to be the most expensive part of the renovation. Yeah, the addition, wouldn't you say?
Maybe.
Theoretically, but
we don't have the
know.
site plans either, if
So
if the well's an issue, it's hard to tell.
some of the items that I've heard from speaking with Chip that are possible is, obviously nothing is set in stone until we get the estimate from GPI and then until you have your conversations with him. But some of the things that could be delayed until later would be the front entryways, doing the siding and insulation around the entire building versus just the addition, as well as going with an oil-based furnace instead of looking at doing the modern wood heat, because that, while in the overall run it would pay for itself, it would be more money up front.
So those are discussions that I think we have with...
Absolutely, but I'm just
GPI.
saying, I'm giving you some of the ideas that have been presented.
It's important for me to hear what they are.
As well as minor things which add up quickly, such as the replacement of fixtures inside, such as the lighting and the trim and things like that, could all be phased in at a later time as well.
And the roof will be expensive, for example.
Would you just, sorry?
The roof will be expensive,
Yes.
but that's something that my
has to
understanding is
happen.
necessary.
So the roof has been already slated to be replaced in 2018 as it was. And that's another thing is you had all mentioned that you had an interest in finding out about the cost of a standing seam. One of the recommendations, though, is that with the changes in technology around shingle roofs, with 40 to 50-year shingles right now, that you can get a very good quality roof, standard type roof, at about a third the cost of a standing seam roof. So that would also be a dramatic cut in expenses as well.
And it seems like you have a timeline in mind, and is there a timeline that we're thinking of that's planned out as far as looking at schematics, meetings? What's our timeline for schematics, design drawings,
So
construction
the
drawings, maybe?
schematics is the primary timeline that's out right now. And
Now, that was the timeline that was in the architectural agreement, basically? Is that what
Yes,
those were the timelines you're speaking of?
that's correct.
And we agreed to those.
And
Well,
you did
we have one timeline to talk about tonight with the contract with the contract manager. That's pretty
Construction
significant. Construction manager, yeah.
And I guess my question too, because I saw that was a month and a half to to completion, I had certain expectations that there would be several public meetings about this. So, I just was trying to figure out what's the timeline and where do we intend to have public information sessions? Because this, to me, is the first time it's really a schematic or anything has been on our agenda to show the public.
Well, I presented the schematics at a previous select board meeting as well.
All right, so there's two, but to really have a...
My understanding from Chip is that he felt that, from his understanding from what you all have communicated, is that the first public meeting would be after, some form of schematic was agreed upon, and then, which would then enable GPI to start doing the work that they need for the financial side of things and the estimating of it. And then we would have a public meeting. He knows from the agreement that you made with him that there was going to be at least two public meetings during the process.
I also think we can't convene a public meeting until we can talk about the financing of this.
Oh,
The cost and the
I
financing.
think it's both.
Say that again?
Yeah, I agree. We need to have both.
Yeah, finance and design.
To have
Yeah.
the discussion.
So,
But are you suggesting a public meeting to discuss the design of the change, or to have, for us to present what we want to have as the changes and have public comment on it? To have a public get into the design process sounds a little bit dicey
I
to
know,
me.
but I think that we need to have a presentation about here's what we did, here's what we're proposing, and here's why.
Yes.
And to have that in our time
And this is how
frame.
much it's going to cost.
Well, and here's the proposed cost,
Yeah.
and have that in our
Built
proposed
into the
timeframe.
time frame as we go along. But then we've got to still, we've got to sit down with the architect and we've got to come up with something with the construction.
Which is what the
But what
meeting...
Gabby, right, but what, I guess, have we set up a timeline so that after
That's-
that meeting, we would then have our first public meeting to discuss
And that
it?
is part of the meeting tomorrow,
I
is
gotcha.
to set up, to firm up the specific dates of the timeline. That's one of the other things that he wants to speak about tomorrow.
Do you have thoughts on, from a timeline perspective?
I know, and that's gonna make a conversation between a number of parties.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to see, because we
No,
seem
it's
to be having, so we're starting to sign contracts and make commitments
Right.
about time frame.
Right.
So I was wondering if we'd had that planned out.
so
Point well taken.
I think the issue at hand is whether we like this drawing and we want to use this as a basis for meeting with GPI and Greenburg.
I think I think that the success of this, among other things, is to have the town administrator over there.
I like the January 3rd proposal, and if the feedback from everyone in the office has been positive, I think it makes sense as a starting point.
Yeah.
And that's all that this is, but,
Yeah.
But,
it's a starting point and nothing's set, but
Yeah.
he needs a starting point and he needs you guys to
Yeah.
approve
No,
something
I think
as a
it makes
starting point.
Yeah.
I really like this room being utilized as a
Yeah.
large area for
Mhm.
everybody, and having you out of here makes, that.
Public space.
Public space,
And
exactly.
part of that too is gonna be
And the
cleaning out
committees and-
all the, everything except for
Right.
the chairs and tables.
But the commissions, everyone,
Yes,
has
exactly.
the ability to utilize this without, worrying whether they're
Exactly.
bothering you.
Or me
So,
bothering them.
It makes a lot
Well,
of
and
sense.
it will enhance communication as well, because if the commissions are all meeting in here, then they can leave information for
Exactly.
each other,
Exactly.
and there would be
It's a good point.
visual information to share.
So do we need anything more formal than that? That it sounds like the agreement amongst us
I
is
think,
to
yeah, I
go
think that's
forward
good.
with this as our starting point.
Okay.
Great.
January 3rd.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and I really look forward to having public meetings and
Yeah.
explaining the need, and also folding into that conversation how much has changed in the business that a town needs to deal with, and that this is a place that you, the public, will come and participate with us.
Thank you, everybody. Good discussion. good points raised. I think the next thing is if Gabby's ready to do warrants.
So I'll make the motion to pay the following payroll and warrants. Payroll for the week ending December 31st in the amount of $9,970.64. Payroll for the week ending January 7th, 2018 in the amount of $5,987.22. Expense warrant 12HS in the amount of $8,085, which is essentially the remainder of our social services payments that were approved at town meeting. An expense warrant 1813 in the amount of $157,823, with the caveat that it be approved once Peter has sufficient information about the basis for the $9,778 invoice from Vermont Roadworks and how that relates to their contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Richard. So my question about that invoice, and I'm not exactly sure. So I'm trying to figure out if that $10,000 expense fell outside of the contract for paving Guilford Center Road, because this is an additional contract, and if so, was it anticipated, or is it included in the contract that we signed with Vermont Roadworks? And I think if it's outside and we didn't know about it,
I think they'll come back to us.
yeah.
Just one
Do you have
other
any
question of the 157,823. Were there any other? That's a big
Any large
10,000.
invoice, maybe?
I didn't have a chance to look at it. I
Yeah, I
apologize
just
for
looked
not
at
being here
briefly.
earlier.
It's the
this
backhoe,
evening.
it's
It's the backhoe.
It's the
$132,000.
backhoe. Thank you. That makes sense.
It's $132,900, which is what you agreed on
Yes, and
Yep.
we need the
last
backhoe.
summer.
No, that's fine.
So you have
I
the
just wanted to
pending
know what it
clarification
was.
of
Yes.
the Vermont Roadworks invoice.
That's correct.
So how does that work now? So we're going to pass this motion, I believe, but it's going to be
With the caveat
Contingent,
that,
yeah.
contingent upon.
Contingent, yes.
Good catch.
Just
All
the
in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay, so the next
I'm
thing on
sorry,
the,
who seconded that?
I did.
Richard,
Thank you, Richard.
the next thing on the agenda is
Executive
a
session.
motion to go into executive session to discuss a contract. I'm sure there's a VS1 relates to that.
And I think we actually have a two-parter for the contract. It needs to show
Yep.
that.
Agreement of public knowledge and put the town at a significant disadvantage.
I'm sure Gabby's got that language, or Peter's
I
got it
will have it in
someplace.
just a second.
Let's use this old
Give
one.
me one.
That's all one. There's
I
five.
was not
total.
expecting executive session today.
He gets impatient if I don't get it 21st. Is there only one? There should be.
Oh,
You got it.
here's one and here's two.
There you go.
Well, that's personnel matters.
Yeah.
But I know it's VSA 313. So first you need to have a motion to go into executive session for sorry, my mind just blanked out all of a sudden.
Contract matters that would otherwise put the town's negotiation at risk.
Correct. And then
Finding it for us.
So I've found it. I'll just make a motion to find that a premature public discussion of the contract negotiating with GPI will cause the municipality to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll make a motion to go into executive session specific to,
I can tell you that one. It's 1 VSA 313A, Section 3.
to discuss a contract negotiation.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
We're going to executive session at 7:35
Oh, and
p.m.
inviting Peter.
Yes, and inviting people. Thank you.
We are exiting executive session at 7:58 p.m. No, 8:55.
55.
And no action has been taken, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
So moved, Richard.
That would
Thank
be
you.
so entertaining, I will say.
Seconded, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you, Ian.
so
See
we
you
have
tomorrow
a
at dawn.
7:30, okay, and also.